Yes, thank you. So welcome, dear brothers and sisters, to today's session on Mahatma letters. And today we will be taking the chronological letter number 112. Let us begin this session with the universal invocation. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness.
O hidden love, embracing all in oneness.
May each who feels himself as one with thee
May each who feels himself as one with thee
know he is also one with every other.
know he is also one with every other. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Thank you and welcome to all of you once again. So, this letter number, chronological letter number 112, it was written by Mahatma KH to AP Senate, and Senate received it at London in July 1883. Now, in this letter, there are not direct occult teachings. It is more about the situations which were prevailing at that time. That is what Mahatma Ji has described. But even from those situations, we can learn a lot of things. So, in that sense, this is a important letter. Before I begin the letter, just to give a brief background about how or why this letter was written. So if you recall Mr. A.P. Sinnett, he was the editor of a daily English newspaper called The Pioneer in India, and he held that position for 11 years, from 1872 to 1883. And during that time, when he was the editor, it was a small newspaper which was started, but it grew into the leading Anglo-Indian daily newspapers of those days. So you see, it has a lot of reach, a daily newspaper which is being accessed by so many people, so it can influence. And it had a lot of reach to the public. And Mahatma Ji held Senate to be very helpful to the cause of Theosophy and the Theosophical Society. So when Senate announced that he was going to be dismissed from his position of editorship of the Pioneer, that happened in 1883. At that time, Mahatma KH, he made an effort. He made an effort for Senate so that he could organize another newspaper called the Phoenix. And this project, the Phoenix project, to start a new newspaper in India, that would require a lot of capital. So that would be supported by Indian capital, the money from the Indian people. At that time, Mr. Sinnett, he left for England and he was hoping to return back soon for this new project, the Phoenix project. And while he was in London, Sinnett wrote a letter to the London Times. Sinnett wrote a letter to the London Times, which was titled Public Feeling in India. That letter was published in May 1883, and this letter is of July 1883. So what happened when Sinnett published that article in the London Times? In that letter or in that article, Sinnett criticized some of the aspects of British government, the happenings which were taking place in India, and he also criticized the actions of the native people. So due to this reason, all the Indian supporters who were going to fund and support financially the new newspaper, the Phoenix newspaper, they became reluctant and they withdrew their funding for it. So that was the situation in May after Sinnett published his article in the London Times. So in July, then Mahatma Ji has written this letter to Sinnett, and he received this letter in London. So now I will share the slides and let us see what Mahatma Ji says in the letter. So this letter, it is stated that it is private, but it is not very confidential. Not very confidential because in case Senate would like to read it to the other members of London, uh, the London Lodge. So Mahatma Ji had also sent another private letter to Senate in which he had referred to this proposed new journal, that is the Phoenix newspaper. And this project, it was supported by Lieutenant Colonel William Gordon. William Gordon, he had written a very encouraging letter to Senate about it. And this person, Mr. Gordon, he was a British Army officer. He was stationed in Bengal at the time. He had joined the Theosophical Society, and in fact, he was member of the General Council of the Society. So, a support coming from him, it meant a lot. And it was envisaged that this Phoenix project, it would help to raise the social and economic conditions of the Indian masses. See, a newspaper which goes across the country, which is read by so many people, it holds a lot of influence over the minds of the people. And it can bring into light the prevailing conditions of the Indian masses. So it was hoped that it will raise their self-respect and their standing in the eyes of the world. So this effort was like erecting a bulwark for Indian interests. Bulwark is a defensive wall. Okay. While these efforts were underway, they were to be supported by Indian capital. And Mahatma Ji says, he barely knew how deeply my poor people had sunk. Meaning, in terms of morality, in terms of patriotism, in terms of spirituality, perhaps even self respect. So he says, how deeply my poor people had sunk. This state of the Indian population, Mahatma Ji says, it was like looking at someone on the deathbed, like he's about to die. Signs of fluttering life beside a dying bed. Meaning their spirituality, moral ethics, self-respect, it was almost dying. The Adept Brotherhood in the snowy Himalayas, they want to preserve the Aryan wisdom and knowledge. One may think that they are far beyond all these social and political workings, like, someone who's in exile and are not concerned with it. But such is not the case. They were very much attentive to the issue and they hoped to redeem the situation by rekindling that spirit in the Indian society, the spirit of spirituality, the spirit of morality, and the spirit of patriotism. Now, as per the rules of the Brotherhood, the Mahatmas, they were debarred from using any abnormal powers. They couldn't use their occult spiritual powers to directly influence the situation that might interfere with the nation's karma. You see, what is the nation's karma? Basically, all the people who belong to one nation, their karma collectively becomes the nation's karma. Okay, so Mahatmas, they neither interfere in the individual's karma nor in the nation's karma. But Mahatma Ji says that by all lawful and normal means, they were trying to stimulate, they were trying to revive and energize the zeal of those people who cared about their cause. So this Phoenix venture, the Phoenix newspaper, it would be one of the means. Now, time was passing by very quickly. Weeks were growing into months, but their object was not yet achieved. I request all of you to please stay on mute. So, although progress was being made, but success had still not been achieved. Now, there was a letter from one Mr. Gwindin Lal, and that was testimony that progress was being made in this direction. And in a few days, there was a meeting going to be held of the native capitalists, the native Indian people who were going to fund the Phoenix newspaper. And Colonel Olcott was going to attend that meeting. The meeting was supposed to happen at Madras. And Colonel Olcott was hoping to receive funding from them. Now, Colonel Olcott, he had also done his best to garner financial support from the Gaikwads who were at Baroda and the Holkars who were at Indore. They were the native rulers of the Maratha power. Colonel Olcott had already made similar efforts also at Bihar and Bengal. Mahatma Ji tells Senate that there was never a time when the help of a man like yourself was more needed by India. We foresaw it, as you know, and patriotically tried to make your way easy for a speedy return. You see the patriotism and the allegiance for the nation that Mahatmas have, and the effort that they made to awaken nationalism in the people. Mr. Sennett, he showed positive spiritual progress and he would be of great help in this movement. So Mahatma Ji was trying to have Sennett come back to India at the earliest by bringing this new newspaper because he was removed from editorship of Pioneer. So Mahatma Ji was trying to get him back to India so that he could play his crucial role in this Indian movement. But alas, at that point in time, patriotism had lost its electric power over the Indian heart. Even a spark is sufficient to start a fire. Okay, so this electric spark that was missing. Those people who were in a position to help and revive India, those who could support financially, who could revive India, who could revive its ancient wisdom tradition. And at that point, India, which was being crushed under the British rule, those very people, they withdrew their support. They did not fund the Phoenix project. The cradle land of arts and creeds swarms with unhappy beings, precariously provided for and vexed by demagogues. Demagogue, he is a political leader who will seek the support of the common man, the ordinary man, by appealing to that man's desires and prejudices. Even if those desires are non-ethical, even if they are selfish. So he will play on their feelings.
क्या नहीं है? अरे ये इसको दबाओ ना, ये अरे आप क्या आप
So such political leaders, they have everything to gain, by this kind of double game, the chicane and impudence. That means they disregard the good interest of the nation or of the people, and they just look for their own profit motives. So Mahatma Ji is calling this land of India the cradle land of arts and creeds. It is the place where Aryan knowledge and tradition first grew and flourished. And India became a place of great arts and true spiritual culture. Now this place had come under foreign rule. Its people were being vexed and they were being deceived by manipulative political leaders. We know the policy which was followed was divide and rule. And Indian people were falling prey to it. Instead of working in the interest of the nation with patriotism, they had withdrawn their support for the Phoenix venture. And the Mahatmas were generally aware of this trend in the masses, but they had not known the real depth or the real gravity of the problem until now, when they tried to raise money for that new newspaper. So Mahatma Ji says that through astral vision or psychic sight, India seemed covered with a stifling grey fog, a moral meteor, the odic emanation from her vicious social state. Odic emanation refers to odile. Odile, it was the term which is used for life force. It was coined by the scientist Karl Reichenbach. So, odile meant the life force. And it was as if the very life force of India had become grey in color. It was as if the nation was dying due to its social conditions and the immoral behavior of its people. Here and there twinkles a point of light which marks a nature still somewhat spiritual, a person who aspires and struggles after the higher knowledge. During the recent book study which was conducted, some of you might have attended it, the book study on Way of the Disciple, conducted by Linda G and Pedro sir. So in that, Linda G had mentioned that the master had shown a vision from higher consciousness to Mr. C.W. Leadbeater. And from that high spiritual vision, the souls of individuals, they appeared like stars in the night sky, you know, like stars or like points of light. The more a soul is spiritually progressed, the brighter and bigger its light was. So masters can see how the person or the individual is spiritually progressing. And the same thing master is mentioning here again. Even amidst the grey gloom which was hanging over the Indian nation, here and there twinkled a point of light, a spiritual person who aspires and struggles for higher knowledge. So, if this beacon of Aryan occultism, that means the great illuminating light of Aryan wisdom and occultism, if that was to be reignited in India, then these scattered sparks, those spiritually aspiring souls, they had to be combined to make its flame. That means the flame of Aryan occultism, it would be ignited again. But then these people had to come together. These people must work together as one body. The ancient Aryan wisdom, which is concealed in the Ved and Puran and Upanishads and other great scriptures, plus all that knowledge which is not documented in any of the manuscripts, but it is available with the Great White Brotherhood of Adepts. That knowledge contains the great occult truths and the teachings which lead to spiritual progress of individuals. Not only individuals, but of nations and of humanity as a whole. And this is the task of the Theosophical Society, to reignite that Aryan wisdom. This is the task of the Theosophical Society. This is the pleasant part of its work in which the masters would so gladly assist. This is what Mahatma KH is telling in this letter. But they were impeded in their work. They were obstructed or delayed in their work by the would-be chelas themselves, okay, because of all those social prevailing conditions. Mahatma Ji was so totally convinced about the necessity and the usefulness of that Phoenix project that he had overstepped his limits to help Senate with it. He assured Senate that once he had started, once they had begun this project, he will continue till the result is known, that whether they will succeed or not. Because now it was a very precarious situation. The funding was being withdrawn. So how would this paper succeed? So he says that once we have started, we will continue to know what the result is. But in this uncongenial, unpleasant experience, Mahatma KH, he suffered almost as if he had been burnt, as if he had been scalded by the breath of a hot furnace. What was this furnace which scalded Mahatma KH? It was the furnace of the moral and spiritual condition of the Indian people. My people, he says. He was so utterly shocked to closely experience this selfish baseness of human nature, which he says is always present in humanity as it passes through this evolutionary circuit. It's a phase of evolution. So it is present, but he was so utterly shocked. He was almost burnt by that furnace. And in this case, Mahatma Ji had also distinctly seen with certainty that it cannot be helped. This situation, it cannot be helped. So he makes a resolve that henceforth he will abstain from any repetition of this unbearable experiment. What was the experiment? To start a new newspaper and get it funded by the Indian capital. And in that experience, this is all that he saw, the baseness of the people, the political situations, these things. Whether the paper succeeds or not, Mr. Senate will be solely responsible for it, says Mahatma Ji. Due to the letter, he got published in the London Times. When Sinnett was in London, whatever he published in the London Times, that caused the funding to be withdrawn. And Mahatma Ji would henceforth not concern himself with the financial side of such worldly projects. Instead, he would confine himself to their prime duty. What is the prime duty of adepts? So by this we come to know. He would confine himself to their prime duty of gaining knowledge and disseminating through all available channels such fragments as mankind in the mass may be ready to assimilate. Meaning, you see, as the adepts they evolve, they gain more knowledge. The same is true for Mahatma KH also. The evolution, even after one becomes a perfected man, that is an adept, the evolution continues. And with that evolution, more knowledge is gained. Now, that is the primary task, the primary duty of the adept. And he will disseminate those portions of the knowledge which is thus gained by him. He will disseminate those portions of knowledge which mankind is capable of understanding and assimilating at the present stage. This is the primary task of the adept for the spiritual upliftment of humanity. Mr. Sinnett's journalistic career in India. He was no longer the editor of Pioneer. So his journalistic career now depended on whether the bitter feelings of those persons whom he had hurt by publishing his article in London Times. So whether those bitter feelings, they could be soothed. Then only this Phoenix newspaper would take off and he could continue his journalistic career. Mahatma Ji says, it was an unfortunate and untimely confession, even though its object may have been honest. Publishing of that article in the London Times, it was unfortunate and untimely. But Sinnett could always depend upon Mahatma Ji's practical sympathy, and he is advised to exercise this kind of genius and dare. That means publishing that the article in London Times. So that kind of genius and dare, he could exercise it in his own counting room or editor's office, not in public media, because it was an ill-timed article. By this rash act of his, Sinnett had inflicted great pain on Mahatma KH. And it could mean only one of the two things. Either Mahatma Ji did not understand the fitness of political duties, or Sinnett will never rise above his English prejudices and the sinful antipathy towards the race and color of the Mahatma, even though he is honest and willing. Meaning, see, after all, Mr. Sinnett was of British origin. And we know that the Britishers had this antipathy. Mahatma Ji uses the word English prejudice and sinful antipathy towards, they called the Asians as people of color. So the Asian race, which is brown in color. So they had their prejudices and they had not got above it. So it could mean that is the reason why Sinnett published that article. So that is one reason. Or it could mean the other way, that Mahatma Ji doesn't understand the fitness of political duties. Okay. Now, Mahatma Ji further tells him that Madame Blavatsky would write a letter to him to tell him more about it. All this harm, whatever had been caused by publishing that article. Now, what does this tell us? This action clearly shows that how by our unthoughtful actions, even if those actions are true and honest, but if they are incorrectly timed, they are unthoughtful actions, then we can injure the very cause that we are working for. We are working for the spiritual progress of mankind, right? And whatever endeavors we make, they can be jeopardized if we act unthoughtfully. Therefore, we must develop spiritual discrimination. What to do, when to do, what is truthful, what is not truthful. For that, we must develop this quality of spiritual discrimination. Now, the next part of the letter, it deals with Mr. C.C. Massey. Again, we may recall Mr. C.C. Massey, one very prominent person who features in many of the letters. that he was this English barrister. He was also in the London Lodge. He was an English barrister and a very keen spiritualist. In fact, he was one of the founding members of the Theosophical Society in 1875 in New York. And then he also became the founder president of the British Theosophical Society. He was a very close friend of Mr. Alcott. And even Madame Blavatsky, she held him in very high esteem. And she wanted the Mahatmas to teach him personally, just like they were teaching Sinnett and Hume. Now, it is said that twice the Mahatmas were in occult communication with Mr. Massey. But Mr. Massey's own mind, it deluded him. And he did not believe in that occult phenomena. So 2 instances of this communication had happened. In the first instance, one glove of a pair. Okay, the pair of gloves, it belonged to Mr. Massey's father, and it was sent to from London. It had been sent to Bombay when Madame Blavatsky was traveling, and from there it was sent by Master M. One of that glove was sent by Master M through occult means, through the agency of Ski. Now, this person Ski, he was an Indian spirit guide of Mrs. Hollis Billing. Okay, she was also in London. So this was the occult transportation of that glove. The pair of gloves had traveled to Bombay, and then from Bombay, Mahatma M had transported one of that back to London. So this was one communication. And in another case, a letter from Master Hilarion, it was sent to Mr. Massey, again through the agency of this spirit guide, that is Ski. But Mr. Massey, he suspected the nature of Ski. He did not know. He doubted Mr. Ski. Sorry, he doubted the spirit guide, which was Ski. And hence, he also doubted the authenticity of the phenomena. That means the transportation of the letter and the transportation of the glove. He did not believe that it was actual occult phenomena. Master says that Mr. Massey, his is one more example of the ease with which even a superior intellect may deceive itself in occult matters by the maya of its own engendering. Now, this is a very important lesson for aspirants. An aspirant must rid himself of doubt. Physical intellect, however high it is always doubting. And so the mind gets deceived due to its own nature. It is inherent in the nature of the mind. This doubt is one of the fetters that has to be removed on the path of spiritual progress. And this shortcoming of the mind, it can be overcome only by vivek, spiritual discrimination. That is why it is cited as the first qualification to be developed. Vivek, Vairagya, Shatsampatti, Mumukshotva. So Vivek is the first qualification, at least to some extent. An aspirant for chelaship, he must develop it in himself, at least to some extent. Now, because in fact, Mr. Massey, he was on probation. He was tried for chelaship. So these were like the tests which were coming in his path. But he did not have that faculty of Vivek. Then there is mention about another situation that also concerns Mr. Massey. And Mahatmaji came to know about it, he says, by having caught a glimpse of the situation in Alcott's head when he was reading Mr. Massey's letter. Colonel Alcott was reading Mr. Massey's letter, and Mahatmaji could see what is happening in his head. That means he could read those thoughts. And so Mahatmaji came to know about this other situation. Now, this is actually a considerable part of the letter. In short, that situation is, it involved Dr. Billings. Now, this situation was all happening in the London Lodge, and it involved Dr. Billings and how unscrupulously he had intercepted Mr. Simpson's letter to his wife. His wife was Hollis Billing, who was being guided by the Indian spirit guide. By and large, she was one most genuine medium. There were, at that point in time, especially in the Western societies, there were so many mediums and spirit callings and communicating with the spirit of the dead. And most of them, or rather many of them, they were fraudulent, and there was hardly any truth in what a lot of them was like imagination. No, people just thought that yes, this communication is happening. But this Mrs. Hollis Billing, she was one of the most genuine medium. This has been mentioned in another letter also. So Mr. Simpson had written some letter to Mrs. Billing, and that was unscrupulously intercepted by Dr. Billing. Then there were bitter accusations and counter accusations which were being exchanged between the Simpsons and the Billings regarding that spirit guide, Ski. Now, again, that spirit guide, Ski, he was genuine. Even Mr. Messi doubted him, but he was actually genuine. And then Mrs. Simpson and Mrs. Billing, both of them were mediums, and they claimed Ski to be their spirit guide. So each one was saying that Ski is their spirit guide. Then Dr. Billing, he bitterly complained to Madame Blavatsky and Colonel Olcott about the Simpsons' fraud, that they were not speaking the truth. And Mrs. Simpson, then she was publicly reproached, reprimanded by Madame Blavatsky. And this whole situation, this whole altercation, it was published even in the newspapers. So this was the situation that unfolded in London at that time. So Mahatma Ji confirms to Senate. Now, in this situation, what had happened? Mr. Messi, he comes into picture. Mahatma Ji confirms to Mr. Senate that the long and short of this entire matter was that his friend Mr. Messi, he had hastily suspected and unjustly condemned the innocent, that is Mrs. Billing. Mrs. Billing was by and large a very true medium. She was very truthful, never fraudulent. So Mr. Messi had been very hasty and he had condemned, he had accused Mrs. Billing unjustly. So this is a lesson for us, never to act hastily, lest we condemn someone unjustly. Now, not only Mrs. Billing, but Mr. Messi, he even accused Madame Blavatsky. So Mahatma Ji adds that Mr. Messi really had no right to accuse Madame Blavatsky of deliberate deceit. Why did Mr. Messi think that she was deceiving him? May I request all of you please to mute your mics?
Vandana ji.
Yes, I muted it. Thank you. I'll share the screen again. Okay. So we were here about Mr. Messi. First of all, he unjustly condemned the innocent Mrs. Billing. And moreover, he also accused Madame Blavatsky of deceit. So Mahatma Ji mentioned to Senate that Mr. Messi really had no right to accuse even Madame Blavatsky of deliberate deceit. Mahatma Ji emphatically he voices his protest against Mr. Messi being so uncharitable towards Madame Blavatsky. She had actually no intention of deceiving anyone. Although, legally speaking, if you suppress the truth, suppression of truth, it is taken as suggesting falsehood. So that is a legal condition. But by that standard, says Mahatma Ji, by that legal standard, then even all the adepts and their chelas, they should be considered liars. Because those people, the adepts and their disciples, they cannot give and they will not give the whole knowledge to the aspirants. That is the rule of the brotherhood. You give only as much you deserve. You get only as much you deserve, as much as you are fitted to receive. So they are not giving the complete knowledge. Does it mean that they are liars? They should be considered liars, just like was happening with Madame Blavatsky, that she had not divulged the complete information. So is that the reason she should be considered deceitful and accused? Actually, Madam Blavatsky had been ordered by Mahatma M to deliver Master Hilarian's letter to Mr. Massey. So that was the task she had been entrusted with. And she had no other means to send that letter except through the spirit guide, that is Ski. And we already know that Mr. Massey, he doubted Ski. She knew that Massey did not trust Ski. That is the reason she concealed the fact that Ski had a hand in delivering the letter. Okay. She forgot very quickly, she forgot about it. She had, in fact, she was unselfishly devoted to Mr. Massey. She held him in high esteem and she wanted Mr. Massey to be noticed and to be taught by the Mahatmas. She was very eager because he had actually all these psychic capabilities, Massey. So she wanted that he should be taught by the real brothers, as they called the Mahatmas, real brothers. And no thought of deceit had ever crossed her mind. She simply thought that it is best not to tell him about Ski, that this Master Hilarian's letter has been delivered through Ski. She thought not to tell Mr. Massey because then it would cancel out the good effects of the Master's letter by arousing suspicion in the mind of Mr. Massey, because Mr. Massey did not believe in Ski. So that was the only reason she concealed the fact. She wanted the masters to be in touch to teach Massey. And here Massey was, who was accusing Madame Blavatsky. So if Mr. Massey would have actually asked her about it, then she would have honestly confessed the truth. This is what Mahatma Ji tells Senate. And then in closing this letter, Mahatma Ji tells, well, my dear sirs, always judge men, we, my dear sirs, always judge men by their motives and the moral effects of their actions. For the world's false standards and prejudice, we have no respect. So this is the most important lesson, I think, from this letter that we can take. What is the motive behind our actions and what moral effects it creates? That is what determines who we are or how spiritually evolved we are. So with that, we conclude this letter. Thank you. And I will now request Sister Meenakshi ji to give us the translation in Hindi.
नमस्ते सभी को, थैंक यू सिस्टर। आज हम क्रोनोलॉजिकल लेटर नंबर 112 ले रहे हैं, जो कि मास्टर के एच एपी सीनेट को लिखते हैं जुलाई 1883 में। 17 मई 1883 को एपी सीनेट ने लंदन टाइम्स को पब्लिक फीलिंग इन इंडिया पर लेख लिखा था, पत्र भेजा था, जो 19 मार्च में प्रकाशित हुआ था। इस पत्र में ब्रिटिश सरकार और भारतीयों के कृत्यों पर आलोचना थी, जिससे फोनिक्स वृत्तपत्र के लिए आर्थिक मदद न करने का नाखुश भारतीय समर्थकों को बहाना मिला। मास्टर कहते हैं कि भारतीयों के हित के लिए एक वृत्तपत्र शुरू करने के इस प्रयास की गतिविधि को देखने के बाद मुझे पता चला कि मेरे बेचारे लोग कितना गिर चुके हैं। जैसे कोई अपनी मृत्युशैया पर प्राण पखेरु उड़ जाने के संकेत पाता है और फिर भी जीवन जीने की आशा रखकर अपनी सांसें गिनता है, वैसे ही हम हिमावत के आश्रमों में निर्वासित आर्य इस मुद्दे पर, यानी वृत्तपत्र के मुद्दे पर चौकस रहे हैं। राष्ट्र के कर्म में बाधा डालने वाले किसी भी असामान्य शक्ति का प्रयोग करने से वंचित होने के बावजूद हमने सभी वैध और सामान्य तरीकों से उन लोगों के उत्साह को प्रोत्साहित किया जो हमारी कदर करता है। उद्देश्य की पूर्ति के बिना हमने सप्ताहों को महीनों में बदलते देखा है। कभी नहीं थी इतनी सफलता करीब है, फिर भी शंका है। ग्विंदन लाल का पत्र दर्शाता है कि प्रगति हुई है। कुछ दिनों में भारतीय निवेशकों की एक मीटिंग मद्रास में होने वाली है, जिसमें मिस्टर ऑलकॉट भाग लेंगे और इससे कुछ लाभ हो सकता है। जैसे उन्होंने बिहार और बंगाल में किया है, वैसे ही वे बड़ौदा में गायकवाड़ और इंदौर में होलकर से मिलेंगे और पूरी कोशिश करेंगे। भारत को आप जैसे व्यक्ति की इतनी जरूरत थी जितनी शायद ही कभी रही हो। जैसा कि आप जानते हैं, हमने इससे पहले ही भाप लिया था और देशभक्ति की दृष्टि से आपके शीघ्र वापसी का मार्ग आसान बनाने की कोशिश की थी। लेकिन अफसोस, देशभक्ति शब्द का अब भारतीय दिल पर कोई प्रभाव नहीं रह गया है। कला और विविध पंथों की यह मातृभूमि दुखी जीवों से भरी है, जो पराधीन है और जो ऐसे लोगों से परेशान है जो छल कपट और बेशर्मी से सब कुछ हासिल करना चाहते हैं। जन समूह में हम यह सब जानते थे, लेकिन हम में से किसी भी आर्य ने भारतीय समस्या की विकटता के लिए उस तरह आवाज नहीं उठाई जिस तरह हाल ही में किया है। मनोवैज्ञानिक दृष्टि से भारत एकदम घुटने वाले धूसर कोहरे से ढका हुआ प्रतीत होता है। मनोबल के रूप से टूटता हुआ तारा, उसका पतित सामाजिक स्थिति से उत्पन्न होने वाला वह ओडिक इमेनेशन है। यहाँ वहाँ एक प्रकाशमय बिंदु टिमटिमाता है जो एक ऐसे स्वरूप को दर्शाता है जो अभी भी कुछ हद तक आध्यात्मिक है। एक व्यक्ति जो उच्च ज्ञान की आकांक्षा करता है और उसके लिए प्रयत्नशील है। यदि आर्यन गूढ़ विद्या की ज्योति को पुनः प्रज्वलित किया जाना है, तो इन बिखरी हुई चिंगारियों को एकत्रित करके इसकी ज्वाला बनानी होगी, और यह थियोसॉफिकल सोसाइटी का कार्य है। यह उसके कार्य का रोचक हिस्सा है जिसमें हम खुशी खुशी सहायता करेंगे, यदि हमें भावी चेलाओं द्वारा अवरुद्ध न किया जाए और हटाया न जाए। एक्सक्यूज मी। सॉरी। मैंने आपके इस न्यूज़पेपर प्रोजेक्ट की सहायता करने के लिए, उसकी जरूरत और उसकी संभावित उपयुक्तता के विश्वास से अपनी मर्यादाओं से बाहर कदम रखा। शुरू करने के बाद मैं तब तक जारी रखूंगा जब तक नतीजा ज्ञात न हो जाए। लेकिन एक व्यापारिक मामले में दखल देने के इस अस्वाभाविक अनुभव में मैंने दुनिया के आग के झोंके में जाने की जोखिम उठाई है। अपने लोगों की मानसिक और आध्यात्मिक स्थिति को करीब से देखकर मुझे बहुत पीड़ा हुई है और मानवीय स्वभाव की स्वार्थी क्षुद्रता के इस करीबी दृश्य से बहुत हैरान हूँ। मैंने इतनी स्पष्टता से हकीकत को देखा है कि इसमें कुछ नहीं हो सकता कि मैं अब से ऐसे असहनीय प्रयोग को दोहराना नहीं चाहूंगा। चाहे आपका पेपर सफल हो या न हो, और नहीं होता है तो यह केवल आपके कारण होगा। 17 तारीख को टाइम्स में प्रकाशित दुर्भाग्यपूर्ण लेख के कारण मुझे इन सांसारिक मामलों के आर्थिक पक्ष से कोई लेना देना नहीं होगा। मैं स्वयं को ज्ञान प्राप्त करने के हमारे परम कर्तव्य तक सीमित रखकर सभी उपलब्ध माध्यमों द्वारा ऐसे अंशों को प्रसारित करूंगा जिन्हें आम जनता आत्मसात करने के लिए तैयार हो सकती है। लंदन टाइम्स वृत्तपत्र को लिखित पत्र में चाहे आपका उद्देश्य कितना भी सच्चा क्यों न रहा हो, लेकिन उस दुर्भाग्यपूर्ण और असामयिक स्वीकारोक्ति के द्वारा आपने उन लोगों में कटु भावनाओं को जगाया है जिन्होंने आप पर सबसे अधिक भरोसा किया था। यदि मैं उन्हें शांत कर पाऊं, तब मैं निश्चित ही यहाँ आपके पत्रकारिता के करियर में दिलचस्पी रखूंगा। आपने मुझे जो इतनी बड़ी पीड़ा पहुंचाई है, उससे यह स्पष्ट है कि या तो मैं प्रशासनिक जिम्मेदारियों के बारे में कुछ नहीं समझता हूँ और इसलिए शायद ही एक कुशल व्यापारिक और प्रशासनिक संचालक होने की आशा कर सकता हूँ, या फिर वह व्यक्ति जिसे मैं अपना सच्चा मित्र मानता हूँ, चाहे वह कितना भी निष्ठावान और इच्छुक क्यों न हो, वह कभी भी अंग्रेजी पूर्वाग्रहों और हमारी जाति और रंग के प्रति घृणा से ऊपर नहीं उठ पाएगा। आगे मास्टर कहते हैं कि मैं मिस्टर मेसी की उस पत्र को लेकर कठिनाई के बारे में 2 शब्द कहूंगा जो हमारे ब्रदर हिलेरियन, जो उस समय स्कॉटलैंड में थे, उन्होंने लिखा था और जो मिस्टर मेसी को स्की के माध्यम से भेजा गया था। यदि मिस्टर मेसी ने अंग्रेजी स्पिरिचुअलिस्ट को यह ऐलान किया होता कि वे महात्मा गणों के साथ गुह्य तरीके से संपर्क में थे, तो उन्होंने सही सही कहा होता, क्योंकि न केवल एक बार बल्कि 2 बार उनका ऐसा गुह्य तरीके से संपर्क हुआ था। एक बार उनके पिता के ग्लोव के साथ, जिसे मास्टर एम ने स्की के माध्यम से नोट भेजा था, और फिर से संबंधित नोट को उसी तरह भेजा गया था बिना शक्ति के खर्च किए। यह एक और उदाहरण है जिसमें कैसे एक अति बुद्धिमान व्यक्ति भी अपने ही भ्रम द्वारा गुह्य मामलों में स्वयं को कितनी आसानी से धोखा देते हैं। दूसरे मामले में मिस्टर मेसी को आज तक यकीन नहीं है कि डॉक्टर बिलिंग ने अपनी पत्नी को सिम्पसन के पत्र से नहीं रोका, उसे ठीक समय पर उसके खिलाफ इस्तेमाल करने के लिए रखा। सिम्पसन और होलिस बिलिंग के बीच एक स्त्री सुलभ माध्यम की द्वेष भावना थी, जो उसके द्वारा दिखाए गए एहसानों के अपने अपने दावों के बारे में थी। मिसेस बिलिंग ने सिम्पसन की स्की को एक फर्जी स्कूप कहा और डॉक्टर बिलिंग ने सिम्पसन द्वारा की गई धोखाधड़ी के बारे में ऑलकॉट और एचपीबी से कड़वाहटपूर्ण शिकायत की, जिसने एक फर्जी स्की को असली के रूप में पेश करने की कोशिश की। यह विवाद अखबारों तक भी पहुंच गया। आगे मास्टर कहते हैं कि मैंने कभी भी आरोपों पर गंभीरता से विचार नहीं किया है और मिस्टर मेसी के पत्र को पढ़ते समय कर्नल ऑलकॉट के दिमाग में स्थिति की झलक देखकर मुझे इसके बारे में पता चला। आपके मित्र ने जल्दबाजी में संदेह किया है और निर्दोष को गलत तरीके से दोषी ठहराया है और स्वयं को आध्यात्मिक रूप से नुकसान पहुंचाया है। मास्टर कहते हैं कि सबसे लास्ट में मास्टर कहते हैं कि माय डियर सर्स, हम लोगों को हमेशा उनके इरादों और उनके कार्यों के सदाचार पूर्ण प्रभावों के आधार पर मूल्यांकन करते हैं। दुनिया के झूठे मानकों और पूर्व धारणाओं के लिए हमारे मन में कोई जगह नहीं है। थैंक यू। नमस्ते।
Thank you very much, Meenakshi ji. Very nice translation. And now our forum is open for any discussion or questions which the participants might like to discuss.
I think those who are involved spiritually in a deeper manner,
Yes.
They will get the help in the similar manner as a ski has provided some help.
Yes, probably.
Yeah.
It may be known to the aspirant, it may not be known. But
Yeah.
they do get help. That is true.
Yeah.
नमस्ते.
Namaste, sir. बताइए.
I want to know who are the spirit guide and what is the process through which they carry our letter to the master?
Sir, what is the process to carry the letter? I cannot comment on that. And the spirit guides, like see, even these Mahatmas, they were in communication with Mr. Sinnett and Mr. Hume. There were other people also of the Brotherhood who were working for this cause, who acted as the messengers of the Mahatmas. Other than Ski, also there were other people who carried these letters occultly. I don't recall the names, but they have been mentioned in the other letters of Mahatma letters. So these were the people who were communicating or in touch with. They would, and sometimes if required, even these occult phenomena would take place through them, just like how master would transmit the letters through Madame Blavatsky. So same way, other people were also used to help in this whole communication, in this spreading this whole knowledge. Now, how the letters are transmitted, that is their occult process. It was not physically written by the pen of the master. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
welcome.
मैं तो नहीं दिख रही ना
Any other question?
Good evening, madam. Bhagirath here.
Yes, good evening.
My question basically, it's not a question, just to ask. In the letter, Master are basically trying to help Indians and try to, spiritually rejuvenate, or does it mean that the masters are also trying to help Indians to get freedom, or they're trying to push Indian people to awaken and also get freedom from the British? Or what was it? I mean, what was the motive? I mean, to write to Messi, Senate, and what do
Right.
you?
Right. This question many people have, that did the masters help in the Indian struggle? If not, why? If yes, then why? Okay. So I think now this is what I'm sharing, what I have understood. To look at the larger perspective, you see, in the letter he mentions that India is the cradle of that Aryan occult wisdom, the occult tradition. Right. If we look at the fifth root race, so the people in India, they were the first sub-race of that Aryan root race. They were later on called Hindus. Okay, so this land, this region was the cradle of that knowledge, of that wisdom, which grew and blossomed. So this region is spiritually, the people of this region, they had that spiritual knowledge, and they were, I think it is not in this letter, it is in one of the previous letter, very recently we studied. He says that this European race, that was the fourth sub-race, and the Caucasian race, not the European. So it comprised of the European people. And that race, they were very high in physical intellect, okay, the brain knowledge, physical intellect. But spiritual knowledge, in that, the Asian race, the people of this region, the Indian subcontinent, they were spiritually highest. And what the Mahatmas wanted, that they should work together to rejuvenate and to bring this knowledge up again, which was lost. See how the civilization works, they work in cycles. Civilizations gain to the peak of wisdom, to the peak of knowledge and culture, and then there is a downfall. So same thing is happening here. But now he wanted them to work together so that this whole thing could be rejuvenated. But on the contrary, what was happening? India was being crushed by the British. So that was his patriotism, to bring up the Indian knowledge, the ancient Aryan culture again. That was his patriotism. But on the other hand, he also wanted that this physical intellect which they had, that should also work together with this spiritual knowledge. So this is what I have understood in a broad overview of the entire Mahatma letters. It is not specifically mentioned in any one Mahatma letter. Anybody else would like to share their view on how this holistic thing was working out? You're welcome.
Most probably, the spiritual aspect was developed at a first level
Mm-hmm.
in the form of an Aryan tradition. Later, similarly, the materialistic world has gained a momentum of enrichment.
Correct.
Now, actually, the balancing of both spiritualism and materialism is taking place as we see the external world. It seems to be so.
True, true. That is true. Yes, I see one hand raised. Lakshmi Anand, do you want to say something? Okay, so that's true. If we have this broad overview, if we look at it, what we call from a bird's eye point of view, how these cycles are working, how spiritual knowledge, it comes to its zenith and then again it is lost. So then we can understand how these things, the different races, they are working. Any other point anyone would like to share? From this letter, we should understand what it means, patriotism, what that means, nationalism, what that means.
Shall I tell?
Yes, who is this?
All this time it was not it was muted. Okay.
Okay.
There is no partiality or the difference between like Indians, Russians, like that to masters. Humanity as a whole is one unit for them. And in that sense, Madam Blavatsky and in one place, masters said that we were waiting for such people centuries together, like Madam Blavatsky and Olcott. And AP Senate is also not a Indian. But as you said, that it is a spiritual land, and that is why they don't interfere. Masters never interfere with the karma of anybody, either group karma or individual karma. But they, as you said, that it is a cradle, like they are using in a class also who are very who are grasping. Teacher is using them in that way. Because in this place, the spirituality can be evolved and these people will be helpful. And in that way, Eastern knowledge must be there to the Westerners also. They tried like that. So there is no partiality or any karma. They never interfere in any group karma or individual karma. Okay, ma'am.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this with us.
Actually, patriotism, as Masters has pointed out, it not refers only to the national patriotism as we commonly think. It is the patriotism of humanity, totally dedicated by morality and this one, the other word I have missed. I think it is totally for the humanity, patriotism for humanity, not for the nation, as we suppose.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So this is what he mentioned, that this land was the cradle of spiritual knowledge, occult Aryan wisdom. Right. So it is, as you rightly said, it is for the spiritual upliftment. Okay. So that is the thing which he wants to revive, to ignite that beacon, that light of the ancient wisdom, which has not been lost in India, which has not been lost. It is still there in India. He wants to revive it in the Indian people. Yes, Mr. Sona Reddy, you want to say something?
So,
Okay. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time today. And I hope we all can learn whatever and how much ever we can from this letter. So with this, we bring our session for today to a close. Let us close with our closing prayer. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Sarvesham Swastirabhavatu Sarvesham Shantirabhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit dukha bhag bhave. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Namaste and thank you all for joining.